and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Dave Kelly, Director of Advanced Media Production at Cal State Long Beach. Today we're going to talk about agriculture, farmers markets, and the production of a sustainable food supply. My guest today is Dr. Libby Gustin. Dr. Gustin is an Assistant Professor of Hospitality Management. Welcome, Libby, and thank you for joining us on Talking Points.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
When we talk about sustainable food supply, maybe we should set some parameters for that, and I have three, and then we can talk about each one of these one at a time. The first one is sustainable in terms of concern for the environment. We want to have agricultural practices, and we certainly want to promote agricultural practices that protect the integrity of the ecosystem. We don't want to inundate the soil and the water and all of our natural resources with excessive chemicals that can accumulate and create harmful effects in the future. The second issue of sustainability seems to be the growth and production of food that is healthy for us, that has the maximum amount of nutritional value so that we can maintain our health. And then the third one is sustainability of the individual's budget and ability to prepare this food in an economical and timely manner. So we'll go through all of those one at a time. First is the environmental issue and preparing food that does respect the integrity of the ecosystem. How can we accomplish that?
Well, many people don't realize is that our soil should be living. And if our soil is living, we're already 10 steps ahead of the way we've been doing it because it's providing the nutrients, it's retaining more water. So you're better taking care of the planet, soil erosion is less. So that means doing things in nature, mimicking what nature has been doing, and creating it in a system that allows us to produce the food that we're producing.
Okay, and the second one is growing food that is nutritionally valuable, the highest quality food that we can grow. We want it to have, want it to be very rich in minerals and vitamins and all the things that are great for us to eat. How do we do that?
So first of all, in order for us to be able to take in those minerals, we need to not have the toxins going in beside it because toxins can inhibit us from absorbing the nutrients. So having clean food that's not covered in chemicals and pesticides helps our nutrient absorption. Now, in order to have the most nutrients from that fruit, you want to pick your fruits and vegetables when they're ripe. They haven't finished developing all those nutrients, so when we pick them before they're ripe, we're already starting out with less. Each day, you're losing a certain percentage of nutrients, some more than others. Water soluble will disappear quicker than some of your other nutrients, but as soon as you pick it from the vine, it's dying. So two things, you want to get the food to people quicker than what we're currently getting into them because our nutrient levels keep lessening the longer that takes to get through the system to your table. And secondly, we want to make sure that we're letting the plant develop all of its nutrients before we're taking it from the plant.
And so it seems like we're talking in this case about farm to market being a very critical time and farmers markets come into play here.
We've seen a tremendous growth in farmers markets because of that, because people are looking to get that food fresher. It also supports a local economy and it keeps your community thriving, and for many people that's a viable option.
So there is a great advantage in buying your food locally.
There is a great advantage.
And it also cuts down on transportation cost and energy involved in transporting those foodstuffs across the country. And then the third issue, of course, was the economic sustainability for the individual consumer. What about folks that have a food budget of, say, we'll just throw a number out, $600 a month, and they start buying organic food and see that that budget's gone up and up and up and approaching $800 to $1,000 a month? How can they, I guess, contain this increase in cost and still have the ability to consume this healthy food?
And that is probably one of the biggest challenges is the equability of the organic, healthier food versus our conventional food. There's quite a price difference currently. So some of the things I recommend is not necessarily shopping for the organic label as much as shopping for how that food was grown and harvested. And I've developed some sheets to help guide people through that process. So at the farmer's market, often you're able to ask them their methods. When it has the organic certification, you're automatically going to pay more because that farmer has to pay a lot to earn that certification. So that is one of the options. You tend to find at a farmer's market a little less in price than if you're going to a health food store. Again, because they have to go through many channels. More channels it goes through, the more the prices get added onto it. The other viable option, if you can supplement somewhat with a small garden in your own yard, that helps as well. So those are some of the options that can help make it more accessible. Fortunately, in January 2014, the new Farm Bill passed, which removed some of the charges for organic coverage, insurance coverage. It's also giving money to farms for diversifying their farms. So a little bit more is coming in line with our bills and government to maybe encourage more of that coming into the market and the prices coming a little bit more in line.
And you've been talking about organic foods, and we need to also address the issue of genetically modified foods, or GMOs, as they're commonly known as. And officially, the U.S. government stance, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration support the growth and distribution of genetically modified food. They say that the genetically modified foods are safe to eat, and because they are genetically modified, they are more resistant to disease. Therefore, they're more guaranteed to get a crop when they plant it, the farmers. And also, they believe that it's the best way to increase the yield or the production of food, because we have a hungry world to feed. We've got 7 billion or so people on the planet growing every day. We've got to feed those folks, and the only way we can do it is to genetically modify. But there's a counter-argument to that, and what is that counter-argument?
Genetically modified food is, I don't know if many people understand that, so maybe I'd like to define that a little bit, because I think people get confused. Genetically modified food is when they're actually inserting a gene in the DNA of a plant. That gene does not necessarily have to be from that plant. So sometimes those genes are a gene from something completely different in order to make it resistant to, let's say, a pesticide, a specific pesticide. When you start altering the DNA and the chemical structure of an organism, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. And so there's been several studies. I have probably over 50 studies very concerned with the outcome after these genes have been altered. There's some superviruses showing up from it. There are many, many issues that we don't even know yet. Several countries have immediately from the inception of the ideas of GMOs have said no to them. So I also want people to understand that you can create disease-resistant plants. You can create stronger versions of your crops without genetically modifying them. There's a process called mass selection. Is one of the techniques. The difference is mass selection takes you about 10 years because it's nature developing and choosing these with a little bit of us encouraging that, whereas GMO is pretty instantaneous. So the amount of time to get that plant is very different. However, it's much healthier to choose nature's structure because our body may not recognize something that's altered as food.
Well, Europe, in contrast to the United States, the EU or the European Union has decided that they don't want to endorse or allow genetically modified products into their food supply, and they say keep it out. We prefer organic food. We think it's healthier, and we think in the long term it's better to obviously eat the natural foods. Obviously, you're more prone to that side.
Obviously, yes.
Okay, and in terms of looking at the benefits of organic, naturally grown food, you've started to talk about those a little bit, but I know one of the ingredients of those naturally grown foods is the class of materials known as polyphenols. Let's talk about polyphenols. What are they and why are they important for us to consume?
Okay. So a polyphenol is basically a plant's defense system. So if something is going to attack that plant, the way they defend it is through the development of these polyphenols. So a plant that is being sprayed with pesticides, they've noticed no longer is developing these polyphenols. So what does that mean to you and me? That to us is the same as what many of us know as antioxidants. So it's very, very beneficial to our health. It's very beneficial to our body fighting free radicals and things that we or even if we eat 100% clean, our environment, we're breathing it in, it's coming in many other ways. So we really need to have those defense systems in our own body as well. So if we're eating food that doesn't have that defense system in it, we're not going to be developing those in our own bodies.
So we're really, again, talking about the quality of the food, and the quality of the food that's naturally grown seems to be naturally better for us.
Naturally.
Okay. Well, in terms of what we're eating, and again, if we're talking about the quality and staying healthy, we want the most nutritious food that we can, as we talked about earlier. So if we're talking about things like polyphenols, we also have to bring up the issue of gluten. I know that a lot of people are concerned that they have a gluten resistance or some sort of allergic reaction, digestive reaction to gluten. You have a story, however, of someone who thought they had a gluten problem, went to Italy, and because they were in Italy, had to eat the pastas, because you've got to eat pasta when you're in Italy, and found that it tasted great and had no stomach issues. Thought they were actually maybe cleansed and cured of the gluten problem, came back to the US, got back into the old food supply of gluten that they normally eat here, and problems reemerged. Tell us about that, and what do you think happened there?
So we have, over periods of time, very much altered this wheat seed, as well as other crops, but we're focusing on the wheat because that's where the gluten is found. It has been seen that many of the allergies disappear when you're eating a wheat seed that hasn't been altered, which is what they have in Europe. And so I think the alteration is making our body, basically when you have an allergy, your body sees it as a toxin. And so our alteration is now having our body look at that and not recognize it as food. That being said, there are a very, very small percentage of the population that that's not true for. They have a true allergy. But I think we've created more of an allergy because our body's been eating this over time. Even if a mother has it in her placenta, it gets passed on directly to the child. So that's why I think each generation we're seeing more and more and more of these allergies surface. And it's because of the alteration of our food more often than because of it actually being an allergy.
And because in Italy it's part of Europe, they don't use genetically modified products, so their pasta is, I guess, naturally grown.
Yes. We have one place in the United States that still has one of the original seeds, and they actually grow some of it for Italy. But it is not genetically modified, it's naturally grown. And the people in Europe are the reason that the genetically modified foods never got to be put on the market.
Right. What about the pests that do invade our crops? I mean, people that grow plants in the backyard, they've seen the tomato bugs, they've seen the aphids. If they have fruit trees, they've probably seen some fruit flies. And those can be very annoying and can damage crops.
Oh, yeah.
How do we take care of those things?
I've had a whole bed of spinach being eaten down to the nub in one day. So it's not realistic to say we don't have to worry about those things. They do exist. There are several differences. In current agriculture, they do monocropping, so they're growing one particular crop. When you massively grow one particular crop, you create a mass amount of that pesticide showing up. Those pests become stronger. So we have these super pesticides as a result of our type of farming. So they just keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger pesticides. The pests get stronger and stronger resistance. When you do it naturally and you're doing diversified crops, you never get an overabundance, and there's ways to treat them naturally. A particular urban farmer I work with here in Long Beach uses canola oil or palm seed oil to rub on the plants and it automatically naturally deters them from eating, and it does no harm to the plant. Ladybugs.
Okay, Libby, I'm going to have to stop you right there. We've got to take a break
Certainly.
right now. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll continue talking about organic foods, and we'll also take a look at the awareness issues here in the United States in regard to genetically modified products. Stay with us.
You always made sure I brushed my teeth.
You told me that smart was cool.
You always told me to dream big.
To all of those parents who took the time to make raising their children their most important job, we'd like to say,
Thank you.
Thank you.
From the bottom of my heart, thanks, Mom and Dad.
this message is brought to you by the U.S. Air Force.
Welcome back to Talking Points. I'm Dave Kelly. My guest today is Dr. Libby Gustin. We're talking about a sustainable food supply. And Libby, before we went to the break, we were talking about natural, organic ways to control pests in our backyard gardens. There's another one that I want you to talk about, which is sort of like fighting fire with fire. So tell us about that.
So you can introduce beneficial pests to your garden, such as ladybugs. And what they will do is they will act as pest control. If you have aphids, whiteflies, any of that, you in a few days won't even know you have them. They completely take care of them. One strategy recommended is to plant flowers that they're attracted to so that they will naturally come on their own. introducing them into my garden once. In 3 years, they keep coming back on their own and taking care of the aphids that come back and the white flies, and I don't worry about it because the ladybugs come right behind them and it's all clean.
Very good. All right, well, let's talk about awareness in general in the United States in regard to organic food versus genetically modified food. And Rutgers University did a study, and they found that 52% of Americans realize that we have genetically modified foods on the store shelves. That's only about half of the country realizes that stores are selling genetically modified foods. And also, we know that about 60 or 70% of our food stuff on the shelves does contain genetically modified materials. And in spite of that, in this same survey from Rutgers, only 26% of the respondents realized that they had ever eaten genetically modified food. They thought they'd never eaten them. And that's only up 6% since a similar study was done in 2001. So over more than a dozen years, that awareness has not gone up very much. What can we do about this, and what does this tell us?
Well, again, I think that the internet today, with a lot of the awareness that's happening, I'm actually really surprised that it is that little. But I think that here in the States, we tend to not really think so much about our food supply because we're really lucky and we feel like we're really well taken care of, so we don't have to think about those things. As the awareness is becoming more and more accessible to people, I think that they'll start questioning. Vermont just passed the right to know law, so they now will have to be labeling food that's genetically modified. So I think that'll help create more of an awareness. As far as it changing, it's up to our voice as a consumer, so we have to wake these people up.
And you've talked about food labeling. We've had some of those battles even here in California, where it was on an initiative on the ballot, which narrowly failed. What can we do again to raise awareness about these issues? One of the things that comes to mind is milk that's grown in California. The dairy growers here in California have decided not to use the bovine growth hormone in milk products and dairy products, and that's known as RBST if you look at the label. I guess those in California that are not aware have a guardian angel in that respect.
Yes, they do.
What do you suggest people do when they go to the grocery store in terms of trying to determine whether they've got a genetically modified product there in front of them?
So the thing I most recommend, and this is a free option for everybody in the United States, there's actually an app called Bicot. And with that app, you can put in all of the things that are really important to you and who you purchase from and what their habits are as far as the production of the food. And you scan the product and it will tell you if it conflicts with something that's important to you. So that's a really simple and easy way to know if the food is, other than having to do a lot of research and look at the company and determine that. Organic labeling does not allow genetic modifying, so that is another way. But I think even more so is transparency, demanding transparency from the food companies. They should be telling us what they're doing to our food. And we demand that by our voice, by voting with our dollar.
Okay, so it's the power of the purse that's going to determine this
I think so.
in the end.
I do think so.
Well, let's talk about frozen foods, because a lot of people who have busy schedules need to rely on frozen foods for a large measure of their diet and their consumption. What about frozen foods? Frozen foods, from what I understand, if they're done properly, if it's flash frozen immediately after picking the crop, it can maintain the vast majority of the mineral and nutritional content.
So if I had the choice to have something frozen or a vegetable that's a week old or a vegetable that's 2 weeks old and was picked not ripe, I would choose that fresh frozen piece of fruit or vegetable because it's going to have more nutrients. What you lose upon freezing it, vitamin E doesn't freeze well, not a lot of your fruits and vegetables. Vitamin E is going to be more in your meats. You also will lose some of your water-soluble vitamins, but you don't lose all of them. And the amount of time often, or the way it's picked and brought to us, it's already going to have less in it. So my first choice is to pick it fresh off the vine or get it from the farmer's market. Our busy schedules don't always make that possible. Where we're living does not always make that possible. So the next best alternative would be this flash frozen food.
How much of a percentage, in just round numbers, would you say that frozen food maintains?
It depends on the actual nutrient, but on an average, you could say 10% a day. And there will be some that'll be less and some that would be more. But on average, I would say 10% a day. And again, there's some that are more stable. I'm actually starting a research project next week where we're going to get it fresh from the farm, picked the day before it was picked, and start measuring it.
So
and do it over time.
if we pick it and flash freeze it within a day or two, we can maintain about 80% of the value?
If you pick it and freeze it right away, you're going to retain 80%. If you wait a day or two, you've already lost some percentages. So if it's going to be frozen, they should freeze it right when they pick it to maintain the most nutrients. You will never have the enzymes, which are also a very important part of our digestive system and the way our body functions. The only way you get enzymes is from fresh fruits and vegetables. Even cooking them kills the enzymes. So.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those issues in regard to vegetarianism, veganism, and then those that have no restrictions like myself, and I think you're in that category now too. Give us kind of a little bit of a guideline of what each means.
Okay, so a person that chooses a diet vegan is they will have absolutely no animal products. So that includes dairy, that includes milk products, well that is dairy, any meats, no fish. So they're really strict. It's only plant-based diet that they'll have. You have then various versions of that, from lacto-ovo to lacto, meaning they'll allow dairy and eggs. And then you have the pesco-vegetarian that will actually eat fish. So those are kind of the extremes. And then you have us, which are omnivores, which will eat all of those things.
You made a personal transition from vegetarianism to being an omnivore. Why did that happen, and what are your thoughts about that?
I was vegetarian for about 10 years, and I took up this wonderful habit of surfing in my life. And surfing required a lot of energy expenditure, and I found myself craving meat, so I knew I wasn't getting enough protein. So upon choosing to bring meats back into my diet, I decided that as long as they're clean, that it is not a problem. And so I was very careful about the hormones in the diet, about if the animal was fed what it's supposed to be fed, so that my meat was clean. And I've had no issues, and I've been eating meat now for 15 years. So.
Okay, and in terms of animal production and the animals that are raised for slaughter, it makes a difference how they're raised. Tell us about that.
So you have choices. My preference is pasture raised, because pasture raised basically means the animal is living out in the pasture as it would in nature, and it's eating on its own whatever it would be eating in the pasture. So a cow's going to eat grass. A chicken's going to eat a lot of things. Chickens will eat insects. Chickens will eat just about anything that's out there. But they're roaming around free. They're accessing it on their own. So they're developing a very healthy system. When we contain them and feed them, they aren't actually maintaining a very healthy system. They may even be fed things that aren't their natural diet. So hence throwing off their system, just as we have allergies, they start having allergies. They stop processing some of the things the way they normally would. So our healthiest option is having food that is eating in its natural environment.
You mentioned pasture raised. I think this is important when it comes to chickens and eggs, because a lot of people go to the grocery store and they find labeling that says cage-free or range-free, but that may not mean exactly what they think it means. But pasture-raised is the real deal.
Yeah. So free range, by definition, says that your animal has to have access to the outdoors. And they don't have to in the first 5 weeks of their life. After the first 5 weeks of their life, you have to have access to doors. So it doesn't mean they aren't still held in cages. They could be fed in the cages. They just have to have a door that they could go out into and be out in the pasture if they choose. But when they've raised the first 5 weeks and they're being fed certain things, this becomes their habit. So it's very different from an animal that is raised out in the pasture that is from day one is free and is out, as in nature, learning to feed itself and eating the things that its instincts choose instead of what's in front of them. Because an animal will eat whatever you put in front of them.
And if we look at the packaging, it may actually even say organic, cage-free.
Absolutely.
What does that mean if it's organic and cage-free?
So then it means they're being fed organic food, but it still may not be their natural diet. It's just they're making sure that that feed is organic. That's the only difference.
All right, well, let's talk about folks that don't live in California, and if we have some viewers on the internet that are watching in northern Minnesota or Michigan or North Dakota, and they're probably saying, well, that's fine for you folks in California because you always have good weather and you can grow crops year-round. Well, that doesn't apply to us up here in the north. We have a lot of cold weather, and our growing season is only maybe 5 or 6 months from spring to fall. what can they do to maintain the healthy lifestyle that we're talking about and have a sustainable diet that works for them?
Move to California. No, I'm just kidding. No, really, we're full here. You have to work within the environment that you're in. That's part of sustainability. It's sustaining the environment that you live in. So they may have to choose that frozen vegetable. They may have to choose some of that produce from California. So it may have to go through the transportation phases. Greenhouses might be a viable option depending on where they are located and what the weather might be to enhance their opportunities for growing. But we have limited choices, but again, the healthier options between the choices you have is what I would recommend.
Okay, well, we just have a couple minutes left, and I want to ask you about hospitality management, which of course is preparing food for restaurants and for restaurants inside hotels. And what kind of a battle is that for you to convince the hotels and the restaurants to go with the organic foods?
You have a range of this going on in our industry right now. For many being in the conventional system, there's a price point, and they've set up their menus, they've developed everything around that. And when you start looking at this sourcing of food, it doesn't let them meet their budgets. So there's a challenge on that aspect. However, you're seeing even on chain restaurants, they're starting to advertise fresh, local, and they're using as much as they can. They're trying to at least supplement some of that because there's a demand for it. The other thing is you're seeing this whole new concept of farm to table concepts. And I know Marriott has in several of their hotels have hired chefs to do the farm to table concept as the restaurant in their hotel. So a shift's happening, but I don't think you're going to see a chain restaurant in the mass production that we're having. And that's the mindset. We may not be able to do mass production at the same level.
I'm going to have to stop you there. This has been a great conversation. I wish we could keep going. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
And thank you for staying with us on this edition of Talking Points. Join us again soon for another episode. Until then, I'm Dave Kelly. Have a nice day.